Welcome to Under the Microscope. I am your host, Jenny Germano. Thank you, everyone, for joining me today. Today's topic, I am going to be discussing the cannabis industry pitfalls and mistakes that are quietly killing operators. And before I dive in, I just want to share a little bit about my background. I got my start working in the cannabis industry in 2009 in Denver, Colorado, running and operating vertically integrated cannabis facilities. And in 2015, I founded my company, 𝗖𝗍cie Consulting, and I have been helping operators navigate and launch their businesses compliantly across the United States for the last 10 years. I appreciate everyone tuning in today. This topic really hit home for me as somebody who's actually worked on the ground floor in these facilities. I worked in these operations in Denver for about 6 years. I do understand a lot of the pitfalls I'm going to be talking about today. And just from my experience of working across the United States in new and emerging markets for the last 10 years in the U.S., I've also witnessed these things happening in operations, and they're pretty common pitfalls. And so hopefully this episode will be helpful for new operators entering into a new and emerging market. It's really important to be mindful of these things, especially, I always say this, but if you're new, it can be very overwhelming, the experience coming into this market. There's a lot of moving pieces. There's a lot of information. It's almost overstimulating in some aspects of it. So it is really important to keep your eyes as wide open as you can to look for things like red flags and some of these pitfalls because they can be costly. So the first place I want to start with is around licensing. And I've seen this in my experience with doing license applications. I've been participating as a technical writer and helping write cannabis applications, I think probably since at least 2017. And whether it was competitive license application or something that was going to go into a lottery, or even when you're in a state like Colorado where a license application is really not that hard and not that competitive. It's not like a new emerging market. Licensing can be a little bit different depending on if it's a mature market or an emerging market. But I find there's a lot of confusion with licensing and operational readiness, and I want to talk about the differences. And this can be a pitfall. So winning a license and building out a facility equals readiness, and that's the assumption that people make. A lot of times the assumption is I submitted my application, I had to submit a compliance plan, or I had to submit a staffing plan, or my business plan. I already had to give them SOPs, or maybe in some states you had to submit, I believe it was Alabama that I worked on that application, and we had to submit the employee handbook. That was all just to win the license. But when we get to actual operational readiness, a lot of things change. Even when I help launch cannabis facilities, things change. So you win the license, all those things that I just listed examples, every state is different. I always try to say this on my podcast, all these whatever 20 plus states that are out there that have medical or adult use, it's all different. Everybody has a different requirement, but I'm going to try to hit this with a broad brush if I can. So these requirements, these SOPs that you're doing to win this application, you submit your application, you win the license, and then now you're in the build out phase, and now you're getting ready to launch. We'll just speed this up here. And you're thinking, I don't have to worry about SOPs because I already have it and the state approved them and they gave me the thumbs up. And so I'm just not going to think about it. I already have a handbook. The state required me to have a handbook. I already have a business plan, a staffing plan, and all these things. And then you just move forward not thinking about it. But it's really not the case. That was just to win the license, right? There's something to be said for real operational SOPs versus the ones that you submit for your application. So I highly suggest once you win the license and you're ready to get operational, that you then make sure that those operational SOPs are actually aligned with every single step in the operation. A lot of things can change from, as we know, this industry, things can take 3 years. I have clients that have been trying to get open for 2 years because they're running into issues on the local municipality level, not the state level, but the local level. So if you won that license 2 years ago, things change. Your business plan's going to change. The market, the price per pound, the product available on the market's going to change. So many things are going to change. Maybe when you first started out, you had a certain amount of capital coming in, and now your capital raise has changed, and maybe you have more money, or maybe you have less money. Maybe the build out cost you more than you thought, and now that's going to affect your business plan and your pro forma and all these things that you're working on to get operational. It's really important to always check in and make those adjustments and adapt. And it's continuous. It's a continuous commitment to always be checking in and seeing where your business is at, where things are aligning with all these plans. This is normal business. We're in the regulated cannabis industry. I say this all the time, almost on every episode that I do. And there's a certain responsibility if you're going to run a regulated business. There's lots of regulated businesses in the United States. There's alcohol, there's healthcare, there's oil and gas, there's lots of things that are regulated. And all these companies, they have to do the same thing. They have to make sure their SOPs are up to date and their policies are up to date. And they have to have human resource department and making sure that it's a safe work environment for employees to work. And these are all normal things that every regulated business in the US have to abide by. So it's just really important to make sure that you're in alignment once you're getting operational. And like I mentioned, I launch facilities all across the United States. And what I find is I'm talking like brand new launching businesses where the clients I'm working with have never worked in the industry before, right? So they're starting from scratch. I'm not talking about a business that has already done this and they could just cookie cutter and copy and paste and launch, and they already have the systems in place and they already understand how to use Metrc and a POS software. These are people who have never seen Metrc, never been on a cannabis POS software before, just have never worked in this industry before. And when you're starting from scratch and you're launching all these systems in place, by the time you get to your full year, you're going to have to update your SOPs multiple times because things are going to change. You're going to have your set of SOPs and you're going to launch. What's going to happen? You're going to say, you know what? I think we need to lessen the steps when it comes to how we greet people when they come in the door. Or we found a better way. We got an ID scanner now, and we're going to be scanning IDs. Or maybe we're not going to take vertical IDs anymore because we're worried about getting caught up in sting operations. So we're going to change our process. Or what if you decide, I had a client who added a drive-through window after 8 months of operating. You need to get an SOP for that. I had another mention that the power went out in his facility when they didn't have an SOP for how to do sales when the power goes out and how to handle that situation. So things come up, which then push you to have an SOP. You could try to have an SOP for everything, but there are things that you're not going to know that you're just probably not going to have an SOP for in that first year of getting your business open. And you're going to have to create an SOP for it or go back and make your SOPs better. And you're going to have to do corrective actions and figure things out saying that didn't work, or I'm seeing that employees aren't understanding this. We need to refine or have more clarity with some of these processes. That is totally normal and the natural progression of your first year of operating in the cannabis industry. So I just want to put it out there that it's not a one-time wham bam, thank you, ma'am, I never have to write another SOP again. It's just not going to happen. It's just something that you're always going to have to do. SOPs, they're part of the foundation of the heartbeat of the business. It's really important. I've had people tell me, thank gosh we had an SOP for that. I had somebody quit or out sick, and I looked up the SOP and I knew how to do this labeling procedure. So they really do serve a purpose. And so it is really important to remember that when you have your licensing SOP, that's completely different than what you're going to launch with. And whether you're a cultivation or manufacturer dispensary, and usually like cultivation, everyone's more dialed in. But sometimes I know people that switch lights years and years later. They get all new lights or they get all new processes, or the way that we've gone in and we've cleaned up entire cultivation facilities who were running a certain way for 5 or 6 years. And our team came in and we just revamped the whole place, all new SOPs. And so those things happen. That is pretty normal in these businesses. So that's one thing that can be confusing. Also, too, sometimes training isn't reinforced. There are states where training is mandated, where we have responsible vendor training program. Some states, responsible vendor training is absolutely required. In other states, it's more voluntary to take the responsible vendor training. A lot of times people don't even take the responsible vendor training, but I think it's really important. I was a bartender serving alcohol. I would want my bar staff and my wait staff trained on how to responsibly serve alcohol. It's really important to have that training. You should at least be training every quarter, every year. I probably can't say this enough about Metrc. I recently did an episode on Metrc. I talk about all the different violations across the United States and a lot of the mistakes that people make regarding Metrc. But the number one thing is people don't take enough training regarding seed to sale tracking software, whether it's Metrc or whatever software that you're using that your state is mandating. Your inventory person should be taking training every quarter. In the Metrc portal, it's free. All you have to do is go in and log in and go into the educational dashboard in Metrc and watch the video. And I suggest you do it every quarter because they update them. The information changes. You want to stay on top of it. A lot of times the mistakes in Metrc are because people are going too fast. They're not paying attention. They're not taking the training. They're just doing things that they think they're supposed to be doing, but they weren't trained properly and they're doing them incorrectly. And then we have that bad data in, bad data out. And then it's a big mess that someone's going to have to come in and clean up, and you're going to have to get the state involved. So you want to stay on top of training. Like I said, SOPs, responsible vendor, whatever training is available. If you're going to be working in these cultivation facilities and manufacturing facilities, making sure you're doing worker protection standards, which is for cultivation around pesticides, worker safety programs regarding OSHA, any kind of food manufacturing, serve safe training, if you're going to be handling materials and making consumable products. I always recommend the compliance person at least start with a 10-hour general industry OSHA training. That's one of the easier ones. I would recommend a 30-hour. It's a little intense, but it's going to give you everything that you need for your cultivation facility and manufacturing facility to really do a good job and be that safety manager for that facility and that compliance person. Also, too, I think a lot of times no one's self-auditing, right? They pass their inspection and it's, I just don't ever want them to walk in my door again. I don't want to really have to deal with it. Every state is different with kind of these inspections. I think early on, they schedule them with you. They come in. In states like Colorado, the state doesn't really come in. They wait for you. They don't come in the beginning because there's really no inventory. It's a mature market, right? Emerging markets is different. They do come in, they inspect you. You have to pass your inspection, state and local, just to get operational. Kind of here now in Colorado, they give you your license and they let the local municipality handle the inspection, and your county, whether it's the city clerk and the fire department, the police department, or excise and license and whatnot. They'll come in and they'll inspect you, and then you can get operational. And the state, they just hang back and wait a couple months. They want you to get comfortable. They want people coming in. We recently had an agent tell one of my clients, he just sat in the parking lot watching people come in and out of the door in an unmarked car. Didn't even know he was out there. And then he sent someone underage in. they're always going to be testing you, and it just depends on the state that you're in. It's not the same roadmap for everyone across every state. There are things that are similar, but there are things that make us different in every state. And that's because regulated cannabis is individually regulated by the state. And this is the piece where, because we're Schedule 1 and it's federally illegal still right now, there's just not one system across the board. That's why packaging is different in every state and all these things. And maybe one day it could just be the same for everyone across the country, but that's not where we're at right now. And I just find a lot of people don't do the self-auditing, or they say, I'll just wait for my inspection. They'll tell me what's going on. Also, managers, they can be improvising, just to throw it out there. A lot of times, as somebody who worked in these facilities, and I received no training, nothing. Nobody ever trained me in any single position. I was thrown into it every single time. They never had SOPs. There were no handbooks. It was like, oh, can you create a handbook? And I know for any employees out there listening to me, you understand exactly what I'm talking about, because you too have been through the same experience. And it's a shared experience among managers and employees in the cannabis industry, where you just get thrown into it and you're learning on the job. But what's crazy is you're getting thrown into this, and we're regulated, and there's compliance, and there's all these tools that I feel that managers are lacking. So they're having to improvise, and to no fault of their own, because if they're not trained properly and they're not given the tools to thrive and do their jobs correctly, they're really just doing the best that they can. And I've always been an advocate for employees. My job is to bridge the employees to the ownership part of the company, and to try to make sure when they launch and there's good communication, let's make sure that we have plenty of training, and let's have a thriving environment for staff. I have to say, I think, gosh, probably out of the 6 places that I was running and operating, there's only one that really cared. Worked at some not fun places. They didn't care. There was nothing in place to make us successful. And it was fly by the seat of your pants kind of situation. And which is why I started my business. My experience on the ground floor is really what inspired me to start 𝗧ice Consulting, because I thought, holy cow, this is just crazy land out here. This is just really nuts what's going on. People not getting paid overtime, and just some of the shadiest stuff I was seeing in the early days. And I was seeing some pretty shady things from 2009 to 2014. So let's just say it's really important to have these systems in place. And also, too, I have on here, compliance lives in a shared drive and not a daily workflow. And also, I find things live on personal laptops and personal devices. One time I was in a facility and I was doing an audit, and I asked for the SOPs, and the employee said, oh, wait, that's in my personal email. I can show you on my personal phone, and didn't even have a company device or computer or a drive or anything like that. So it's more than just having a shared drive and documents. It's things really need to be living documents and attach the workflow and adjust accordingly as needed, and adapting. If things aren't working out in the business, you fix it. One of my clients, he knows that. He's living, breathing it every day. He's such a great example. I think he's working 7 days a week still as an owner in his business. He's a very small operator, but he's living and breathing it every single day. If how cash is put away at the end of the night or counted. And there's so many kinks that they had to work through and issues they had to fix because things didn't work, or it was too challenging. It was too complicated for the staff. They had to find ways to make it easier and to become more efficient. That is just going to be the normal system. Don't think that when you launch, everything is going to be perfect and all your systems that you've spent all this time obsessing over is going to be perfect, because you're going to have to make adjustments. It's not always going to work. And let's just say it might work for the launch. It might work because you have a small team in place when you first open up. But you're going to expand and get bigger and busier, and you're going to have more staff that you're going to have to adapt those things. So I just want to make sure people separate what you do with the license application. And then when you get to the launch and then long term, all going to be like multiple different phases, and it's not always going to be the same. And you're going to have to make those adjustments. Next, I want to talk about silent profit killers, internal shrinkage. As we know, the margins are pretty tough in the cannabis industry. And just depending on what market you're in, what state is what I mean when I say market, versus even in a new emerging market, things can be tight because if there's not, let's just say, there's not a lot of product on the market yet. Like in Colorado, there's so much product to choose from. If you're launching now in Colorado, what a wonderful place to launch. A lot of times I feel there's a lot of negativity around Colorado. I'm a super fan of Colorado. I'm still a believer. I love the Colorado cannabis industry. Even though I work all across the United States and help people, I'm always trying to find ways to help people understand. Actually, here are some of the positive things going on in Colorado. I know a lot of people that are successful here. I helped launch multiple facilities last year in Colorado, and those guys are still doing great. And I'm getting ready to launch some more come this spring. I'm launching another facility. And so I just think you have to really get an understanding of the market and how to take advantage of what's in the existing market versus if you're launching in an emerging market. There's going to be things you're lacking in the emerging market, and there are going to be challenges there. And there's going to be things that you're lacking or missing, and there are going to be challenges in the mature markets. And if you got all your ducks in a row and you're organized and you have all these systems in place, you really can be successful in the cannabis industry. So these silent profit killers, operators, they underestimate inventory variance creep, sampling abuse. Hello, does everybody know about sample abuse? In fact, I make it part of my onboarding process when I'm launching these new dispensaries, no matter what state I'm in, as we go over the sampling procedures. People can straight out get into massive arguments. I've seen it where owners have literally just stopped giving out samples because it's causing so much infighting, and that people are taking too many samples and their samples aren't getting to the right people. I've seen it where someone was taking samples and just to take them and give them out to all their family members, and it wasn't going to all the bud tenders, and it wasn't going to the manager. Look, everybody loves free weed, right? That's what it comes down to. Who wouldn't want free product, right? But the point of the sample, at the cost of the vendor and the manufacturing company, those are meant to go to the person that's going to be ordering the product, and not to take advantage of the manufacturing company or the cultivation facility. We all love samples. I love samples. But at the end of the day, that sample is costing another business money, which that's part of doing business, right? Giving out samples, just like sometimes you can go places and they'll give you a free sample of beer, or you go to the farmer's market. Everyone's got samples. Giving out samples is like an everyday thing that other businesses do, but you just want to make sure you're not abusing sampling, and you want to have a procedure. And you definitely want to have an SOP or how you guys are going to handle samples in your business. Destruction log errors. I see this all the time. You can't read the handwriting. I do know regulators regularly ask for these destruction logs. Sometimes I've helped clients where we had to go in and actually turn in the destruction logs, and that they had to align with the video footage to make sure the destruction logs have a timestamp written on it so you can match it up with your video. And we've actually had to turn that in to the regulating body. And a lot of times people don't do that, or they're not signing their name, or they're not filling out a space on the log, or they don't at least get the last 4 digits of the RFID tag number, or if you're using barcoding system. Also, vendor receiving discrepancies. Some people don't always weigh the flower that come in, or they don't open up the boxes and count things. And I know a lot of time that you can call up the vendor and said, hey, I found this error, and they might make it up to you on the next order. But this is all shrinkage, right? At the end of the day, everything that somebody's doing is costing money, whether it's hourly and labor costs. Those things add up over time. The less efficient you are in your business, that's where that shrinkage comes in. You're losing money, especially in the regulated industry like that we're in when it comes to cannabis. Waste tracking inconsistencies. I see this a lot, specifically on the cultivation side. Dispensaries do not have a lot of waste. And I always know when there's theft going on when I come in and audit a dispensary and there's a ginormous amounts of wasting going on. I understand that people drop jars and they break. Yes, there's floor bud. This is for states that allow deli style weighing. Some states, they do not allow deli style weighing. I like the deli style for the consumers because I know why they like it and they want to see what they're getting. So I get the whole concept. But as a compliance person and wanting clean inventory and good clean inventory numbers and efficiency and not a lot of loss, I love packaged flower because it really does eliminate everything is packaged. Bud tenders aren't spilling bud on the floor. They're not dropping jars and they're breaking on the floor and you're losing a whole entire 60, 70 grams of flour that was in that jar. Things to talk about and think about that can happen and how all that profit margin shrinking and that loss continually happening. If there's a lot of waste in your dispensary, you need to be questioning what's going on. I have clients have very minimal waste. Even if things are expiring, you need to be selling that stuff right away and not selling expired products. You should be doing FIFO. I think a lot of people in cannabis know what FIFO means by now, but in the restaurant industry, it's first in, first out. People use this anywhere they stock shelves, like 7-Elevens, convenience stores, grocery stores. That should be for your inventory room. If you have a nice big vault and you have a lot of space where you can be organized, people I work with, let's organize things by dates. I make everyone put everything in bins. We write the expiration date on the outside of the bin. So when you walk in the inventory room, you can see all your expiration dates. Because here's what happens when they ship something to your dispensary and you get a case of something, let's just say it's 24 packs of gummies. They're all going to be from the same production batch. They're all going to have the same expiration date, and they're all going to be under one metric tag, right? So that means you already know the expiration date. So that's getting put in your storeroom or your storage or your vault. Take a Sharpie and on the outside of it, just write the expiration date. So when you walk in to your room, you see all the expiration dates and that you're managing all those dates so you know when you need to push things and move things through your product instead of having to open up boxes all the time and look. I love coming in and organizing a vault room for all those people who love organizing out there. I am obsessed with coming in and designing workflow and making sure vaults are organized and everything makes sense to make everyone's job easier and to be efficient with inventory control. So, because that saves time and that saves money at the end of the day. Also, metric reconciliation gaps. That's another area I see shrinkage. I think not everybody reconciles on a daily basis. It's really crazy. And I know I've mentioned this before in a few of my episodes, but I read all the administrative reports and summary suspensions and violations across the United States, whether it's in Michigan or Colorado or Oklahoma. Honestly, it's what I do in the morning, and it's just part of what I do so I can have a deeper understanding what's going on out there. What are the compliance mistakes? I often tell my clients, hey, if anything comes out in your state around a violation, read it. Use it as a tool to learn and make sure that you're not doing those things. And it's really a good exercise to see where these gaps are that people aren't paying attention. A lot of times, too, this not reconciling, I'm reading on some of these suspension reports or where they're getting their licenses revoked, just they're not even reconciling daily. And there's all this discrepancy between when the product was accepted, it's not on site, it is on site. And you have to understand they're tracking, it's a numbers game. It's bean counting. That's what my colleague Alex, who has been on a couple of my episodes, we're always talking about. We got to go count some beans. It's a numbers game. And for the regulators, it's the same thing. They're tracking the numbers in the data, and they go on to your facility on site. And if the beans aren't there, something's wrong. If it's not matching up with what's in the Metrc system or your inventory system in your state, then something's gone awry. So that can really kill your margins. Not to mention, you could get shut down and lose your business and lose all the millions of dollars that you invested to get operational to begin with. As everyone knows in the cannabis industry, even the smallest of businesses, they're still investing $1 million at the end of the day. Even social equity license, even if they win their social equity license or their micro business license, which can be more affordable than just like a standard commercial license, you still have to play by all the same rules. You still have to do inventory tracking, SOPs. You have to do OSHA. Some of these small facilities in New York have to be GMP compliant on the manufacturing side. So compliance adds up. And so the smallest of operators are having to carry those same burdens of compliance that a large operator, they might not have 20 licenses where they're paying for that. You know what's crazy is that I honestly find that the smaller operators do better at compliance than some of the MSOs, because sometimes the MSOs are having to let go of employees, cut compliance departments. They don't have as many on staff, or they let go of all the staff. And then they have the attorneys doing compliance. And then a lot of times the systems are overwhelmed and there's not a lot of people in place to manage all the moving pieces. And so I think for them, I think compliance is more challenging than it is just for a single dispensary operator. So most operators track revenue daily, but very few track leakage in their business with the same urgency. And I find that with compliance too. I think everyone is always about tracking the numbers, where the money's going, but no one's really doing daily audit checklists. I've found that not everybody runs reports in Metrc. And recently I was showing a client how to run adjustment reports in the Metrc system, and he had no idea his employees were making large adjustments. And then we were like, maybe there's theft going on. There's no way to find out now because the recordings are all gone, because we're past the 30 days retention for the DVR. And so it's important as an owner that you're running on a weekly basis. You should be running that adjustment report in Metrc to see, are my employees making 300 gram, 200 gram adjustments, and why are they making those big adjustments? Because finding out 6 months down the road, you're not going to be able to really do anything about it, or you're not going to be able to fix it. So the next piece I want to talk about is data without decision making. Speaking of data, I was just talking a lot about Metrc. Cannabis operators are drowning in data. We have POS reports, the Metrc exports, yield tracking. We have labor hours, and we have incident logs, but they're not using it strategically. So some common issues: no KPI dashboard, no weekly metric review. Like I talked about, running those reports, seeing the adjustments that employees are making, no accountability tied to performance data. So data doesn't always create discipline, but decisions do. So collecting the numbers is not the same as operational maturity. And so take advantage of the data that's out there. I know it's a lot. Probably everything has a dashboard, right? Whether it's your POS or your ERP, or if you're using a platform, if you're a cultivator, manufacturer. But it is really important to look at that information, especially in the dispensary. I find a lot of times people aren't looking at spending or trends. We're in 2026 now. Every business in the cannabis industry should be using data and information. I look at data all the time. for my business. I try to use the information. I run reports. I go and do research. The next piece I'm going to jump into is cash flow blind spots. Even some of the profitable operators, they're struggling with liquidity, such as receivables in wholesale markets. Inventory sits too long. I find a lot of times inventory could sit too long because you order too much. I have clients that don't do big orders. They want to run out rather than have it sitting too long and then trying to figure out how we're going to move product. Payment terms are mismatched with vendor schedules. I feel like we could do a whole episode on payment terms. I take a deep breath because it's such a sore subject for me. I myself have not been paid by people and had to take them to collections, get attorneys involved. It's brutal. I feel for the operators out there. I know lots and lots of operators. Gosh, I think I just saw somebody's getting sued in Colorado. I think MJ Biz Daily might have just recently come out with an article, and I can't remember, but there's an MSO getting sued, and I think it was for around $300,000. And I find that the people who owe the most money to vendors are typically the larger multi-licensed operators or MSOs. Tax reserves, they're not separated, and payroll timing isn't forecasted properly. So revenue does not equal cash flow and stability. And that could not be a more true statement for sure. So those are just some things to think about. The middle manager gap. Gosh, this really hits home for me as somebody who ran and operated vertically integrated dispensaries for a long time here in Denver. I was a manager, but I had previous management experience. I came from the hospitality industry. So I had a lot of management experience working in hospitality for the 23 years that I did. So I brought that over with me to the cannabis industry. Jumping into a management role was natural for me. I already had the skill set. And that's why I chuckle at this next section, because this is something I've witnessed. Gosh, and I even had this happen to a client of mine where they had somebody who overinflated the truth of experience, pretty much telling them, I was a manager, I know how to use Metrc and all this stuff. And because I'm their auditor and I come and audit them every quarter, I caught all kinds of crazy stuff going on and that wasn't making sense. And that's when we discovered that didn't know how to use Metrc and that all these things were going on. And so you have to be careful as a business owner that vetting your employees, are they telling you the truth? If they tell you they know how to use Metrc, is that really true? How do you know? Because it just seems so easy for people to overinflate on their resumes and change words and make it seem like they had a lot more responsibility than they did. So the thing with this middle manager gap, cannabis, they promote fast. And anyone from Colorado that's out here listening, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because I feel like Colorado, we're number one at doing this. We just put people in positions that do not belong in them here in the cannabis industry. We just put people who should never be managers, who should never be a grower, who should never be running the Metrc system. It's really crazy. And I can say this because I've been working in the state of Colorado now for 17 years, that I could just write a book alone on all the things I've seen happen in Colorado. So we promote fast, bud tender to store manager right away, trimmer to cultivation lead, loyal employee, let's just make them the compliance manager. Why not? They can handle compliance. Maybe they can be a compliance person because now they've watched all my episodes on my podcast. Who knows? But it takes more than that, right? Look, as somebody who was thirsty to get experience, right? So I could climb the ladder too. Trust me, I had to start at the very bottom and work my way up. I was a receptionist. I had 23 years of experience running commercial kitchens, catering. I worked at Mile High Stadium with the Denver Broncos, running all the press tents for Monday Night Football. Oh my gosh. And I get into the cannabis industry and they're like, we'll pay you $8 an hour and you're going to sit at this desk and check medical red cards. And I did it, right? I did it. Even though I was working at Mile High, the old Mile High Stadium, that's how old I am, and working there and doing all the press and making sure everyone was fed and dealing with ABC and NBC and Fox and when they came into Denver. And here I am at this medical dispensary just checking people in, and they wouldn't let me do anything else. They wouldn't let me budtend, nothing. If anyone knows what it's like to start at the bottom in the cannabis industry, that's me. And I worked my way to the top. And now look, I own my own company. I've been in business 10 years, went through all the craziness for 6 years of running these operations, working for people who didn't care about their employees, working for not good operators. But it's what developed me as a person to get to where I'm at now. It took 17 years. I wasn't ready to be where I'm at right now in my career until right now. It took every single stepping stone, every failure, every mistake, every bad job. It took all those things to get me to where I'm at. And I made lots of mistakes as a manager, and I definitely have never been perfect. So I want to speak out there to the managers right now. And I understand you have to start somewhere, right? But it can be a challenge because if you go from, oh, you're a loyal employee, let's make you a compliance person, you should ask yourself, do they have the ability to grasp and absorb all the information that it requires to be a compliance person? Just things to think about, and really thinking, if you are going to promote somebody, do they have the skill to perform that job? And if not, can you help them get there? Education and training. What tools can you give them so they can thrive if they really do want to be that compliance person, or they really do want to be the inventory manager? Don't be in such a hurry to get promoted. Put in the time to learn and grow and get there. You'll know when it's time. And I understand too. I've been in those shoes myself, working in these facilities. So without leadership development, this can lead to inconsistent enforcement, big time exposures here. I see a lot of mistakes employees make due to getting promoted and then actually not having the skill set, and where it's cost the operators money or a violation or getting in trouble. There's also HR exposures, there's safety gaps, saying like selective compliance and staff confusion. There could be a lot of staff confusion. I think it's important to really assess your employees and really pay attention and be engaged with them and watch them and let them come to you with your ideas. I think I had my last episode where I had an operator on. He talked about how he tries to create an environment so his staff can come to him with ideas, because I think of things that he never would have thought about, but he still has to reel them in, right, when it's necessary. And he still has to put the bumpers up. But don't be afraid to listen to the ideas that your employees have for you, because they might just think of something that you did not think about. They might be able to streamline or make that process even better. It's important to engage with your staff. The next piece I want to talk about is safety blind spots. Specifically, this can happen with cultivation and manufacturing. There's obviously safety issues with dispensaries, or more with the general public and security because they're customer facing. But when we're talking about cultivation and manufacturing, we have electrical load strain, we have monitoring and documentation gaps, PPE enforcement inconsistencies, extraction emergency protocols, ladder safety. Gosh, I see this a lot. I've seen people where I'm like, where did that ladder come from? And they're like, we built it. And it's not even like an approved ladder. They just built it with scraps of wood just so they could get up to the space to store things. Workers' comp, not having workers' comp, incident reporting, integrity, even like illness reporting with OSHA. A lot of people aren't following OSHA, although I know in Colorado, that is coming to an end because they've been here since 2024, going through every single facility on manufacturing and cultivation. And it's a 5-year plan. Here pretty shortly, they'll be done. And hopefully everyone will be in OSHA compliance here in Colorado. So many operators assume we haven't had an incident, so we're fine. And that's like the compliance piece too. Haven't had a violation. We're okay. The MED came in and everything looks great, but they looked at 3 things, right? It's not always that they came in, they looked around and they didn't find anything. That's really not what gets people in trouble. What gets people in trouble is disgruntled employees call tip lines and call on operators because they're mad because they got fired or something happened in their job, and they go down the list and they call the 20 agencies against that operator. That can be a risk exposure. Another is adverse events is a risk exposure. Somebody gets sick off your product. They're going to report it to the state. A lot of states have that information on packaging where they can report it. A recall happens, and maybe now the regulators are going to come into your facility and start looking around. It doesn't always mean a violation is going to come from an inspection. It can come from something else. It can come from something that's outside of the inspection. It's just, I don't want people to get comfortable in that, right? And that, oh, if they don't find anything in the inspection, they're not going to find anything ever until they come back a year later. I call that compliance complacency, something I came up with 10 years ago, just getting complacent with compliance, and we'll just wait and have them come and tell us what's wrong. You don't want to do that. That can get you in a lot of trouble. And the next piece, speaking of compliance, there's no internal audit rhythm. Like I said, operators, they wait for state inspections. They wait for insurance reviews. I'm not sure how many operators get insurance reviews. It's usually if your building burnt down or all your inventory was lost, maybe they come in and do an inspection because of a claim. I highly recommend having a weekly audit checklist, a safety walkthrough, SOP validation checks. Those things are all important. And the next piece is building for today's regulations and not for tomorrow's. I would say operators often build to survive the current scrutiny, but regulations evolve and reporting expands, insurance carriers tighten standards, and documentation expectations increase. A lot of times people just build for what they're told to build. They don't look into the future. Here's a prime example. I know a lot of companies that don't even have an employee handbook because they say we don't have employees yet. And then what happens is they end up hiring a bunch of staff, and they're so busy that they never deal with getting the employee handbook, and they don't have time. Another piece is I don't have to do OSHA because OSHA's not here knocking on my door. So I'm just going to do what the state tells me, but I don't really have to follow federal standards because cannabis is a Schedule I drug. It's not federally regulated. I don't have to do anything the EPA tells me or OSHA tells me. I'm not going to think about GMP compliance. I'm not going to think about quality management systems. So people, they don't plan for the future because they only care about what's knocking at my door right now. I can only handle what I have to do now, but then you're always behind. You're always behind with that mentality. So it really is important to lay the groundwork early in your business. In one of my episodes, we talked about with the potential descheduling, how operators can start working on quality management systems now, or GMP, good manufacturing practices, or FDA food safety. Doesn't mean it has to be perfect, but start mapping it out. Just start laying the groundwork, even if it takes you a year, slowly working your way, because all of a sudden the industry is going to pivot, and a lot of people are going to get left behind because they weren't looking to the future. And so you have to look ahead at what's coming and staying on top of it. And there's ways to do it where you're not paying millions of dollars to do it. And I know it can be hard because, especially when you get into dispensaries, it's just putting out a lot of fires. It's just nonstop. You're problem solving all the time. It definitely reminds me of the catering industry. I was doing offsite catering. My God, we're just putting out fires left and right. Oh, the wedding cake has a dent in it. Oh, we don't have enough steaks to serve and all these things. And it's really about problem solving and finding solutions. And that's really what the cannabis industry is about. It's always going to be the up and down. Life in general is the up and down journey. And same for the cannabis industry, same as a cannabis operator. It's going to be nonstop curveballs in the industry. And all these things that I'm talking about, all these pitfalls that you can fall into, you really don't have to. If you have all the systems in place and you do all the things that you need to do and you stay on top of it. I know it seems overwhelming. I can't stay on top of it because I'm drowning. I have all these things going on. But if you lay out all the groundwork ahead of time, it's going to help you adapt. You're not going to be drowning. And so hopefully that is helpful. It's really important. If your system can't scale with regulation, it's going to break under it. It's just going to crack and the foundations will be exposed. And there's so many people that reputational risk exposure in their business. And everybody has levels. You have on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most extreme. There's a lot of people that are 10s out there. Some people that are 5s. There's other people that are 1 or 2. Their risk exposure is low because they're on top of it. But there are people existing out there that have a high risk exposure level because they're not managing compliance well. It's important to try to do your best to avoid these pitfalls. And you can build systems. I love a good binder. I'm a compliance person, but you want to build systems. You want to have more than binders. You want to have systems. You want to track your leakage as aggressively regarding your revenue. If you can create a real KPI dashboard and review it weekly, just find a way to look at your reports and look at the data and what's going on in your business. Also, too, you want to separate tax reserves and forecast cash flow monthly. This is something that your accountant and your CPA can help you with. They're really good at cash flow management and forecasting, and they can get you completely set up. I highly recommend using a professional for that. You want to train managers like leaders. Look, not everyone is meant to be a leader. Some people are really amazing at following leaders. There's nothing wrong with, hey, I don't want to be a leader. I don't want the responsibility. I really just want to sit here and bud tend. I love talking to everybody. I love talking about the products. I get all excited when a new customer comes in. And that's fine. That's amazing. Thank God we have people that do such a great job at bud tending and engagement and really what they do. And then we have leaders. We have people who want the responsibility, who want to lead, who want to be the example. And there's nothing wrong with that. But train managers to be leaders. And if they can't, maybe they're not meant to be a manager. And that's totally fine. It took me a long time before I even became a good manager. I wasn't always a great manager. I made mistakes. I look back now and go, holy cow, I can't even believe it. Like, whoa. And I look at myself and put myself under a microscope. Take the time to invest in your staff and your employees with training and making sure they're in the right role. Also, audit yourself before the regulators do. My gosh, if everyone could be like some of my clients who love to get audits every quarter, who's auditing your auditors? I know I have a compliance team. I have a compliance person, and then I'll say, oh, did you know about this change? And they'll say, oh gosh, I didn't. Huh, our compliance team hasn't told us that yet. Who's auditing your auditors? Who's checking them? That's the whole point, checks and balances. Who's making sure that your compliance team is actually not missing anything? And build compliance for future regulation and not just current inspections. Winning a license gets you into the game, but operational maturity, that's what's going to keep you here, among a lot of other things, but maturity is part of it. And once again, I thank everyone for their time. I'm really excited. I've got my spring schedule worked out. I just booked more guests here. I'm actually already planning topics for May. I just cannot believe how fast things are moving when I was scheduling for April and now into May. I appreciate everyone who has been listening to my podcast. If you could please share it with people and help me grow it and get it out there so people can learn this podcast exists. I appreciate everyone who tunes in every week here in the United States. I look at data. So I think we have 25 states that are listening to my podcast on streaming, and as well as, I think I saw at least 6 or 7 countries. We got listeners in Spain and Germany. It's really exciting for me. So I really appreciate everyone for helping me grow this podcast. And once again, thanks so much. And I'll see you guys all in a week. Take care.